What if I told you that every great empire in history, Rome, Spain, Britain, didn't fall to enemies on the battlefield, but to a silent enemy they created themselves? Not swords, not invasions, not revolutions. Something far more dangerous, their own money. Sounds impossible, right? But here's the strange part. It happens the exact same way every single time. There's a rhythm to history, a pattern so precise it's almost mathematical. An empire rises. It grows rich, confident, unstoppable. Then, beneath all that power, something small begins to crack. Coins lose purity. Promises outgrow reality. Trust starts to fade. And before anyone notices, the collapse has already begun. But what if, and this is the part that should make you uneasy, that same pattern is repeating right now? The question isn't whether it's real, it's how far along we are. Because every empire believed it was different. Every empire thought the rules of math and history didn't apply to them. Rome said it, Spain said it, Britain said it, and now, in 2025, America is saying it too. Pause and think about that. Rome ruled half the known world for 500 years. Spain owned enough silver to buy the planet. Britain commanded a quarter of humanity. All three vanished, not from defeat, but from debt, from currency collapse, from believing they could outsmart the oldest law in economics. You can't spend more than you earn forever. But here's where it gets eerie. Every single collapse followed the same 7 stages. Military expansion, overspending, currency debasement, inflation, loss of confidence, total breakdown. Not similar, identical. As if history itself runs on a loop. Picture it. Roman citizens trading coins that once shimmered with pure silver, now dull and thin, pretending nothing's changed. Spanish ships hauling mountains of silver across the ocean. Wealth so vast, it destroys itself. British ministers clinging to the gold standard as their empire cracks beneath war debt. Each story different, yet perfectly the same. And every time, people in power promised, this time it's different. But it never was. The mystery is why no one ever sees it coming. Maybe it's because collapse doesn't look like collapse at first. It looks like prosperity, new monuments, bigger armies, easy credit, until suddenly the numbers stop adding up. Inflation surges, debt explodes, and the same leaders who once promised endless growth start whispering about temporary measures and necessary sacrifices. That's when the fear begins to spread, quietly, invisibly, just before the fall. And if you're wondering how close we are to that moment right now, stay with me, because what's unfolding in the US economy today mirrors the same signs that appeared in Rome before 250 AD, in Spain before 1600, and in Britain before 1931. Every warning light on the historical dashboard is flashing red. Debt spiraling, money printing accelerating, inflation rising, confidence slipping. But here's the twist. This time, the stakes are global. Rome's fall shook Europe. Britain's collapse redrew borders. But the US dollar isn't just America's currency. it's the world's. And when the reserve currency follows the pattern, the entire system feels it. So the question isn't, could it happen? It's what stage are we in? Because the pattern isn't random, it's a timeline. And once an empire enters it, there's no turning back. What's terrifying is how familiar every headline now sounds. Talk of trillion-dollar deficits, rising military costs, nations trading outside the dollar. All the same notes of an old song history has played 4 times before. The tempo is speeding up. The next verse is already starting. And when it hits, it won't feel like history repeating. It'll feel like everything changing, all at once. But before we get to the collapse that may be forming right now, we need to go back to where it all began. To the empire that first wrote the script the rest of the world keeps following. And that story starts in ancient Rome. Imagine standing in the heart of Rome around 100 AD. Marble temples gleaming under the sun, legions marching in perfect formation, markets buzzing with gold and silver coins. The empire ruled 60 million people across 3 continents. Its roads stretched farther than any civilization before it. Its army was feared, its laws respected, its economy unmatched. If you lived then, you'd believe Rome could never fall. It was too big to fail. But that's how the story always begins. Rome's power was built on trust. Trust in its government, its soldiers, and most of all, its money. The denarius, a small silver coin introduced in 211 BC, became the backbone of Roman trade. It was pure, reliable, accepted everywhere, from the deserts of Egypt to the hills of Britain. One coin, one value, one empire. That trust held the Roman world together like invisible cement. But empires are expensive. Every new border meant more roads to maintain, more soldiers to pay, more citizens to feed. The treasury never seemed to stretch far enough. And here comes the first crack, subtle, invisible at first. Around 64 AD, Emperor Nero needed more silver than Rome had. So he did something no emperor had dared before. He diluted the denarius, reduced its silver content from 100% to 90%. A small change, or so it seemed. But here's the strange part. Nero didn't call it fraud. He called it innovation. By mixing base metals with silver, he could mint more coins with the same amount of silver. It was free money, or so he thought. A clever fix that quietly broke the foundation of Rome's wealth. For a while, it worked. Rome's monuments rose higher. Its armies kept marching. Its citizens kept spending. But each emperor who followed took a little more silver out of the coin. By 200 AD, under Caracalla, the denarius was down to 50% purity. By 265 AD, under Gallienus, it was barely 5% silver. The coin that once shimmered with real value had become a shell. Cheap metal coated with a thin layer of illusion. And here's where everything unravels. Imagine being a Roman soldier on the frontier. You're risking your life for the empire, but your pay, once worth a month's food, now barely buys a loaf of bread. Farmers refuse to sell for worthless coins. Merchants demand payment in gold or goods. Tax collectors can't collect because no one trusts the currency. Prices explode. The economy seizes. The empire begins to tear itself apart, not from invasion, but from the inside out. And just when everyone thought it couldn't get worse, it did. By the mid-3rd century, Rome was printing more coins, not to create wealth, but to survive. The more they printed, the faster the prices rose. Inflation devoured everything. The same empire that had once built aqueducts and arenas now struggled to feed its own people. Civil wars erupted. Armies turned on their emperors. The great Roman machine that had once seemed eternal began to sputter and die. Here's the part most history books skip. Rome didn't fall overnight. It fell in slow motion. For 200 years, the currency decayed, confidence eroded, and every emperor promised to fix it with the same solution: more money. But every new coin printed only sped up the collapse. By 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire was gone. Not because its enemies grew stronger, but because its money grew weaker. The pattern was set, the blueprint for every empire that followed. Overspend, overreach, and when the bills come due, destroy the currency to pay them. And the chilling part? Rome's citizens didn't realize they were living through history's first great economic collapse until it was over. That's the thing about currency decay. You never feel it all at once. It starts slow, like a whisper in the background, until suddenly it's the only sound left. But Rome was just the beginning, because 12 centuries later, another empire would rise, richer, bolder, certain it had learned from the past. It hadn't. And when Spain struck silver in the New World, it unleashed a new kind of disaster, one that proved you can have too much of a good thing. When Rome fell, the world went dark for centuries. But eventually, new powers rose, nations hungry for wealth, glory, and control. Among them, one stood above all: Spain. And for a brief, dazzling moment in the 1500s, Spain became the richest empire the world had ever seen. Gold from the Aztecs, silver from the Andes, armadas crossing oceans. On paper, it looked like paradise. But paradise has a price, and Spain was about to pay it in full. It started in 1545. High in the mountains of Bolivia, miners struck a mountain so rich in silver it glittered even under moonlight. Cerro Rico, the rich hill. From that one mountain poured nearly half the world's silver for over a century. Ships left every month, heavy with treasure. The Spanish dollar, pieces of 8, became the world's first global currency. Everyone wanted it. Everyone trusted it. And Spain, drunk on its own fortune, believed the good times would last forever. But here's the strange part. The more silver Spain had, the poorer it became. You'd think endless silver would mean endless prosperity. But economics has a cruel sense of irony. The flood of silver made everything more expensive: food, tools, wages, even war. What used to cost 1 silver coin now costs 10. Inflation spread like a fever across Europe. Prices soared, but Spain kept spending on wars, cathedrals, and luxuries imported from abroad. The empire wasn't producing wealth anymore. It was simply spending it faster than it arrived. King Philip II, who ruled from 1556 to 1598, became obsessed with maintaining Spain's global dominance. He financed wars against the Ottomans, rebels in the Netherlands, and even the English Navy. Each battle drained more silver than the last. To fund them, Philip borrowed heavily. By 1557, Spain's debt had spiraled so far out of control that the king did something no monarch had ever done before. He declared bankruptcy. The world was stunned. The richest nation on earth, bankrupt? Impossible. But it happened again and again. 4 defaults in just 40 years. And here's where the real collapse began. Lenders lost faith. Merchants refused to accept Spain's promises. The royal treasury tried to fix it by minting cheaper coins, copper mixed with traces of silver, like Rome's old debased and the silver, once Spain's symbol of glory, became its curse. Just when Spain should have built its industrial strength, it built debt instead. It imported weapons from Italy, textiles from France, and ships from the Netherlands, paid for with silver that vanished overseas as quickly as it arrived. Every coin that entered Spain left again, taking real value with it. By the early 1600s, Spanish nobles who once flaunted their wealth now faced bankruptcy. The empire's economy hollowed out like a rotting tree. And yet, the kings kept borrowing, kept fighting, kept pretending it was all under control. Because that's what empires do in decline. They fake stability while the foundation crumbles. By 1648, the Peace of Westphalia ended Spain's long wars and its long illusion of power. The empire that had ruled continents now stood exhausted, drowning in debt, its economy shattered, its people impoverished. The silver that once made Spain mighty had destroyed it from within. But the pattern didn't stop there. In fact, Spain's fall only made the next empire more dangerous. Because when Britain rose to power in the centuries that followed, it studied Spain's mistakes carefully and then repeated them in a different way. Spain proved that wealth alone can't save an empire. Britain would prove that even discipline and power can't protect one forever. And just when the world thought it had seen the last of the empire collapses, the British pound began to crack. When Spain's silver empire crumbled, a new power rose from the shadows, colder, steadier, and far more calculating. Britain didn't have mountains of silver. It didn't need them. What it had was credit and the discipline to use it like a weapon. For over 2 centuries, Britain built an empire that covered 1/4 of the world. It ruled the seas, trade routes, and the money itself. They called it the empire on which the sun never set. But like every empire before it, the sun eventually did. At the heart of Britain's power was a single promise: the pound sterling. For generations, it was as good as gold. Literally, you could walk into a bank and exchange a pound for a fixed amount of gold at any time. That trust was everything. It turned the pound into the world's reserve currency. By the 1800s, 60% of global trade was priced in pounds. London wasn't just a city. It was the financial capital of the planet. But here's where the story begins to bend. Power always tempts empires to reach further than they can afford. Britain financed colonies, trade companies, armies, and an ever-expanding navy, all through loans. The British Empire was built not on silver or conquest alone, but on debt. And as long as investors trusted that the pound was solid, the system worked flawlessly. Then came 1914. World War I ripped through Europe like a storm. The war devoured money at a pace no one had ever seen. In just 5 years, Britain's national debt exploded more than tenfold, from $650 million to over $7 billion. To pay for it, the government printed more money and suspended the gold standard. For the first time, the pound was no longer fully backed by gold. But after the war, they tried to turn back time. In 1925, Winston Churchill, then Chancellor of the Exchequer, made a fateful decision. He restored the gold standard and its pre-war value. It was a move meant to show strength. Instead, it strangled the economy. The pound was overvalued, exports collapsed, unemployment soared, and Britain's economy began to suffocate under its own pride. Just 6 years later, in 1931, the inevitable happened. Britain was forced off gold again. The pound was devalued, and the world's trust began to fracture. The empire had survived the Great War, but the cracks were spreading. And then came the second blow, World War II. By 1945, Britain was victorious, but broke. The war left the nation buried under debt equal to 270% of its GDP. Entire cities lay in ruins, and the empire that had once financed the world now needed loans just to survive. In 1944, as the war drew to a close, world leaders met at Bretton Woods to rebuild the global financial system. In that single moment, Britain lost what Spain once lost: global dominance. The US dollar replaced the pound as the world's reserve currency. But the humiliation wasn't over. In 1949, Britain devalued the pound by 30%. In 1967, it happened again. Each time, citizens watched their savings evaporate overnight. Confidence collapsed. The empire's colonies began breaking away. India, Egypt, Africa, the Caribbean. Not through rebellion, but through exhaustion. Britain could no longer afford to hold them. Stop. And here's the cruel irony. Britain didn't fall in flames like Rome, or drown in silver like Spain. It sank slowly, under the quiet weight of its own promises. By the 1970s, inflation had soared to 25%. The nation that once financed empires was now begging the International Monetary Fund for help. The pound, once the strongest currency in the world, had become a symbol of decline. It's easy to look back and wonder, how could they not see it coming? But that's the thing about patterns. You never see them clearly while you're living inside them. Britain thought it could manage its way out of debt. control its currency, and bend history to its will. Every empire thinks that, until it can't. And when Britain's empire finally faded, another one quietly took its place. Richer, more powerful, more ambitious than all the rest combined. Because while Britain was collapsing under the weight of its debts, a new empire was rising across the Atlantic. One that believed it had solved every problem Rome, Spain, and Britain had faced. It hadn't. When Britain's empire faded, the world didn't collapse, it just changed hands. The torch of global power passed quietly across the Atlantic. The United States stepped onto the stage, victorious after World War II, rich, industrialized, and unchallenged. Its factories ran day and night. Its currency was trusted everywhere, and its military unstoppable. For the first time in modern history, one nation controlled both the world's economy and its money. The US dollar became what the British pound once was, the foundation of global trade. In 1944, the Bretton Woods Agreement tied every major currency to the dollar, and the dollar to gold, $35 an ounce. The system was elegant, stable, and simple. As long as the US kept its promise to back dollars with gold, the world would believe in it. And for a while, it worked. The American middle class flourished. Roads, schools, suburbs, dreams, all built on the strength of the dollar. But deep underneath the surface, the same cracks that doomed every empire before it began to form. It started with overreach, the Cold War, the Vietnam War, military bases in more than 70 countries, massive social programs at home. America was spending more than it earned, convinced its wealth was infinite. But the math never changed. Not for Rome, not for Spain, not for Britain, and not for America. By the late 1960s, foreign governments noticed something alarming. The United States was printing more dollars than it had gold to back them. France, led by Charles de Gaulle, began demanding gold in exchange for its dollars, and others followed. The gold in Fort Knox started to disappear. The illusion of endless wealth was cracking. Then came 1971. President Richard Nixon made the most consequential financial decision in modern history. He closed the gold window. Overnight, the dollar was no longer backed by anything tangible. Just faith, just trust. The US had entered the same stage Rome did when it debased the denarius, the same stage Britain reached when it abandoned gold, pure fiat money, backed by promises. At first, nothing seemed wrong. The economy kept growing. The markets kept climbing. The petrodollar system, built in the 1970s, forced nations to buy oil in US dollars, propping up demand. It looked like America had escaped history's curse. But remember, every empire thinks it has. Then came the debt. In 1980, US national debt stood at $900 billion. By 2000, it was $5.6 trillion. By 2020, $27 trillion. And in 2025, it's past $36 trillion. A 40-fold increase in just 45 years. Every crisis brought more printing. Every solution came with a bigger price tag. In 2008, the Federal Reserve began quantitative easing, a polite phrase for creating trillions of dollars out of thin air. During the pandemic, it printed over $4 trillion in 2 years. The pattern was no longer repeating, it was accelerating. But here's the eerie part. Even as history's warning lights flash red, the same old phrase echoes again. This time, it's different. The results are already here. Inflation hit 9% in 2022, the highest in decades. Real inflation, food, savings lose value faster than wages can keep up. The world is starting to shift, slowly, then suddenly. In 2000, 70% of global reserves were held in US dollars. Today, it's below 60% and falling. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, are building their own systems. Countries are trading in their local currencies. Central banks are buying gold. Confidence in the dollar, once unshakable, is quietly eroding. And like every empire before it, the US stands at a crossroads, powerful, proud, but weighed down by debt, division, and denial. Military spending soars, social promises expand, money printing continues. The machine keeps running. But for how long? Because this isn't speculation anymore. The pattern is here. Military overreach? Check. Massive deficits? Check. Currency debasement? Ongoing. Inflation? Rising. Confidence? Slipping. The United States is not unique. It's simply next. And just as Rome couldn't see the end until it came, just as Spain thought its silver would last forever, just as Britain believed the pound was untouchable, America believes the rules of history no longer apply. But the pattern has never been wrong. And if it holds, if the sequence continues, then what comes next isn't prosperity. It's the same thing that's ended every empire before: collapse. But collapse doesn't always look like ruin. Sometimes it looks like transition. Because when one currency dies, another is born. And that next phase, that uncertain moment between old power and new order, is exactly where the story leads next. History doesn't whisper anymore. It's shouting. And if you've been listening closely, you can hear the same sound echoing through every century. The sound of an empire realizing it's not invincible, because every great power follows the same 7 steps. It starts with dominance, a golden age where the currency is pure, the people are proud, and the world believes in their strength. Rome had the silver denarius. Spain had the global silver dollar. Britain had the gold-backed pound. America has the dollar, still the world's reserve currency, but now stretched thin by promises that can't be kept. Then comes overextension. The borders widen, the military expands, the government spends to sustain illusions of power. Rome conquered, Spain colonized, Britain industrialized, America globalized. Each one grew just a little too large to sustain itself. After that comes the comfort of debt. Easy money, easy answers. When the cost of empire becomes unbearable, they borrow from the future. And when borrowing isn't enough, they start printing. Every empire tells itself it's temporary, just a fix, just until things get better. But they never stop. And that leads to the fourth stage, currency debasement. Rome mixed its silver with copper. Spain drowned the world in silver until silver itself lost value. Britain printed pounds backed by nothing. America? Trillions created from thin air, justified by new names, stimulus, quantitative easing, modern monetary theory. Different language, same delusion. Then comes inflation, the slow theft of wealth that every citizen feels but few understand. A loaf of bread costs twice what it did last decade. Savings buy less each year. People blame corporations, governments, wars, or greed. But beneath it all, it's the currency that's failing. Stage 6, the loss of confidence. The moment people stop believing the money holds value, the system breaks, quietly at first. Foreign nations diversify out of dollars. Investors seek gold, crypto, land, anything real. The trust that built the empire starts to fade. And when trust dies, collapse is already written. The seventh stage, the one history never reverses, collapse. But collapse doesn't always look like destruction. Sometimes it's just transformation, a reset. Old systems decay. New ones emerge. Rome's fall led to feudal Europe. Spain's decline paved the way for colonial revolutions. Britain's collapse gave birth to America's rise. And when the dollar finally loses its crown, something new will take its place. Maybe a global currency, maybe a digital one, maybe a return to gold. The cycle doesn't end, it just changes form. And here's the terrifying part. The United States isn't just another empire. Its currency isn't regional, it's global. When the Roman denarius fell, it shattered one empire. When the dollar falls, it shakes the world. Every nation, every market, every savings account is tied to it. The pattern doesn't just repeat, it multiplies. But there's a deeper truth buried in all of this. Empires don't die because of greed or war or corruption. Those are just symptoms. They die because they forget what value means. They start trading real wealth, production, discipline, trust for paper promises and political convenience. And when the promises grow larger than reality, collapse becomes inevitable. You can delay it, you can disguise it, you can deny it, but you can't escape it. That's what history has shown. 4 empires, 2,000 years, one unbreakable pattern. Rome debased its silver to fund its wars. Spain drowned itself in riches it didn't earn. Britain borrowed the world to fight for dominance it couldn't afford. And America, the latest and greatest, believes it's immune. It isn't. The pattern doesn't care about flags or borders. It doesn't care about military might or technology. It only cares about math. And math always wins. So the only question left isn't if the pattern will complete. It's when. When will the confidence crack? When will the printing stop working? When will the system that built modern civilization finally reset? History doesn't make predictions. It gives warnings, and this is one of them. The pattern is complete. The cycle is turning. And when it does, most will be shocked. But you'll remember. Because now you've seen it. And once you see the pattern, you can never unsee it.